Pacific Northwest often begins its days in soft gray. Clouds move slowly over the Cascades, their edges thinning into pale mist that hangs between the trees. The air is cool, layered with the scent of damp pine. Rivers slide quietly through deep valleys, their surfaces a dull reflection of the morning sky. In late November, the light arrives reluctantly. It spreads carefully across the landscape, over distant ridge lines, over empty fields, over the long stretches of highway that rise and fall with the land. Nothing moves quickly. Nothing demands attention. It is a region shaped by distance and silence, where the atmosphere seems to absorb the small noises of everyday life. Planes pass overhead from time to time, their engines softened by thick clouds, heard only as a low vibration across the sky. This quiet setting forms the backdrop for one of the most enduring mysteries in American aviation history. An event remembered as sharply as it is quietly, settled somewhere between certainty and unanswered possibility. On the afternoon of November 24th, 1971, a man arrived at Portland International Airport. He wore a dark suit, a white shirt, and a black tie. With a small tie clip, he carried a briefcase. He purchased a one-way ticket to Seattle under the name Dan Cooper, a name later recorded incorrectly by the press as D.B Cooper, a version that stayed. Nothing in his appearance suggested urgency. He waited like anyone else, quietly, without creating a ripple in the rhythm of the airport. Witnesses later described him as polite, calm, and unremarkable in demeanor, someone who blended easily into the soft noise of travel. When he boarded Northwest Orient Flight 305, a short flight that normally lasted only about 30 minutes, there was no sign that anything unusual was about to unfold. Just a routine boarding, a man finding his seat toward the rear of the aircraft, a briefcase placed within arm's reach. The plane lifted off into the overcast afternoon and disappeared into the muted sky. Shortly after takeoff, the man handed a flight attendant a note. She first assumed it was a casual gesture, something forgettable. Only after he spoke quietly did she understand that he was informing her of a device in his briefcase and requesting specific actions. The crew remained composed. Passengers continued unaware of any change in the cabin. The plane adjusted its path gently, as coordinated with the ground. Nothing abrupt, no sudden maneuvers. The man asked for a sum of money and for several parachutes. His tone was described as steady, never raised, never hurried. He accepted the flight attendant's presence beside him with what she later described as courtesy and an unusual calm. The aircraft circled above Seattle for some time as preparations were made on the ground. Outside the windows, clouds drifted by in slow formation, and the afternoon light faded toward early evening. At 5:39 p.m., the plane landed. Passengers were escorted off, still unaware of the full situation. They stepped into the terminal thinking only that a mechanical issue or minor delay had interrupted their travel. On board, the man received the requested items. He looked at them briefly, checked little, accepted them without visible tension. Then he instructed the crew to take off again and fly south toward Mexico City, at a lower altitude, at a slower speed, with the rear stairs remaining accessible. Outside, night settled across the Pacific Northwest in its usual quiet way, with cloud cover thickening above the forests and rivers below. At some point after 8 p.m., in the darkness over southwestern Washington, the rear stairs were lowered. A shift in pressure was felt in the cabin. The plane continued forward into the night. When the aircraft landed later in Reno, the man known as Dan or D.B. Cooper was no longer on board. The area identified as the likely jump zone was vast, a mixture of deep forest, open fields, and rugged mountains. Night conditions had been poor. Clouds, rain, wind. No one on the plane saw him jump. No one on the ground reported a definite sighting. search teams moved quietly through forests and along riverbanks in the days that followed. They walked through wet undergrowth, listened for anything unusual, examined places where the earth had been disturbed. Nothing conclusive was found. In February 1980, nearly 9 years after the event, a family on the Columbia River discovered several decaying bundles of cash, partially buried in the sand. The serial numbers matched part of the ransom. The location, far from the estimated flight path, raised new questions rather than answers. The discovery was a turning point, but not a clarifying one. It confirmed that at least some of the money had made contact with the elements and the shifting riverbanks. But why it was there, how it traveled, and whether it had been placed intentionally remain unanswered. No further bills from the ransom have ever entered circulation. Several items became central threads in the story. A dark clip-on tie left on seat 18E, a mother-of-pearl tie clip, a small number of cigarette butts, parachutes examined and accounted for, though one was missing. Bundles of weathered bills recovered years later near the river. Each object offered a piece, but none formed a full picture. The tie contained particles that later analyses attempted to interpret, yet the interpretations themselves varied and remained uncertain. The money found on Tina Bar was degraded, the rubber bands weakened, but still partially intact, raising quiet questions about exposure and time. The evidence stands not as a path towards certainty, but as a collection of still life details, unmoving, unaltered by the passing years, and silent in what they reveal. Some believe that D.B. Cooper survived the jump, that he landed safely, left the area unnoticed, and continued his life in anonymity. Others suggest that the jump itself was impossible to survive under the conditions that night. Low visibility, strong winds, imprecise equipment, and that he may have perished in the forest without leaving a discoverable trace. There are theories about his background, about whether he had aviation experience, military training, or none at all, whether he acted alone or had help waiting somewhere on the ground. It is possible that the money found by the river traveled there through natural processes, flooding, erosion, shifting sandbanks. Some propose that it may have been placed intentionally, though no evidence confirms this. Others suggest that the known flight path might have varied slightly from belief, shifting the possible landing zone. And there are those who feel that the identity of D.B. Cooper may never have been known, not because the clues are missing, but because he may never have existed in any permanent record under any name we recognize. Each theory sits at a distance, gently suggested, never fully proven. The case remains open to interpretation, held in the space between what is known and what is quietly unknowable. Today, the forests of Washington remain as they were, dense, quiet, often wrapped in mist. The Columbia River continues its slow, steady flow past sandbars and driftwood, past the place where the money was found. The skies above the region are crossed by flights every day, their paths steady and unremarkable, their passengers unaware that one of the most enduring mysteries in aviation took place in the same airspace. From certain hillsides, the valleys stretch far into the distance, their outlines softened by fog. It is easy to imagine how a single figure descending by parachute could vanish into such a landscape. Not dramatically, not with spectacle, but simply by becoming part of its vastness. Time in the Northwest moves with a kind of gentle persistence. Seasons shift quietly. Rain falls in long intervals. Memories settle. More than 5 decades have passed since the man calling himself Dan Cooper boarded Flight 305. The passengers have aged. Witnesses have given their accounts. Investigators have retired. Files have been studied, restudied, and stored. Yet the central figure remains unidentified, unlocated, unresolved. No definitive answer has emerged about where he went, how he landed, or who he truly was. The Pacific Northwest continues its rhythm, clouds drifting across the mountains, rivers moving steadily toward the sea, the sky changing its shades of gray. Some mysteries fade quietly. Others remain suspended in the calm between questions and memory, like a figure descending through darkness into a landscape that keeps its silence. There is no final certainty here, only the quiet that follows a long-told story, settling softly over forests, rivers, and the passing years.